I'm sure like many of you, you turn the TV on, you see some official squirming in a chair before Congress, and you start to think about what does it mean that that's happening. Fine, maybe it's related to the Talmud. Maybe the Talmud has something to teach us about politics and power and why people want to kind of tuck away and hide. If you're wondering who I'm talking about, it was our Secretary of War or Secretary of Defense, depending on how you describe him. It's not necessarily because I connected it or any of the testimony, frankly, to the Talmud or believe that Talmud's a political document, but because I do think the Talmud teaches us something about power. On Monday, we celebrate, or many of us do, some of us do, Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer. Reform communities, we tend not to make much of a deal of it. Maybe we'll have a picnic. Orthodox communities will celebrate with a bonfire. And if you're in the state of Israel, there'll be bonfires all over the place. The rabbis connected it to a story in the Talmud, Shabbat 33b. And I don't know, this year when I read it, it said something to me in a way that I don't think it had before. And also it spoke, by the way, to calculations of power and machinations of people to maintain power or get into power in a way that I hadn't seen before. So if you can imagine, there's three different rabbis sitting, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon ben Barchai. And they're all sitting around with a third guy named Yehuda ben Gerim. Now, does ben Gerim mean his real name? Probably not, because a ger is a convert. So the rabbis probably hid who he really was. But either way, you have a guy who's not necessarily a part of the rabbi group sitting there. Rabbi Yehuda speaks first, and he talks about just how pleasant and exciting it is, in a weird way, the nation is. And by the way, that moment in time, he's referring to Rome. They've established marketplaces, they've built bridges, they've paved and created roads, and they've even constructed bathhouses. Maybe it's a good thing we don't stink. You can imagine. Rabbi Yossi, silent. Rabbi Bar Yochai speaks up. He goes, everything they've established for their own purpose. The marketplace to place prostitutes in them, the bathhouses to pamper themselves, the bridges to collect taxes. Conversation ends. Everyone goes on about their way. Rabbi Bar Yochai was the head, by the way, of the Sanhedrin. He's a pretty powerful guy. He's poking at Rome. And the truth is, even if you can imagine, there's probably lots of conversations where people poke and make fun of things. But I can imagine also it's one of those conversations where if you're sitting with someone powerful and they say something that pokes at the eye of somebody else, how easy is it for you to go and share and tell and blab? So just have that in the background. So Yehuda ben Gerim, he does do something. He is calculating. He starts, and he goes ahead and he shares what he heard from the conversation with Bar Yochai. And somehow he's so good at gossip that he gets all the way back to Rome. And I'm pausing here because I'm not going to argue that Yehuda ben Gerim is a villain. I don't think he had some villainous hat on or a mask or looked like a cape ready and out for destruction. I don't think he sat there planning to do something overt. I do think he was trying to take advantage of the situation. He probably told his household just the way you might, showing off a little bit. I sat with important men. You can almost imagine hearing him say, this is what he said. Many genuinely believed, maybe, he was praising Rome. Well, Rome was in a position of power after all. And Bar Yochai's criticism was, in a bizarre way, thinking about the time period, reckless. Because it was leading into eventually revolts and other things. But maybe he thought by reporting him, he could earn credibility. After all, Rome was connected to those in power, meaning the Jews who oversaw the land. He made a small calculation for his own personal advancement. And the crazy thing is, that calculation produced the death sentence for someone in that group he sat with. That's how it worked. You don't have to be malice. You don't have to go in with a plan. Just a little bit of ambition and some carelessness. And then, lo and behold, someone else will pay for it. Rome's response was immediate and clarifying. Yehuda, who elevated all of us and should be elevated, appointed head of the sages, head of the speakers in every place. That's it. He took Bar Yochai's place. Rome popped him in. Yossi, the silent one, well, he was exiled, safe, removed, not to engage with others again. Shimon, well, he was sentenced to death. Why? He told the truth. Let's sit for that for a minute. It's not so much ancient history. We can all think of people who have done political machinations, told something, made some convincing argument, didn't think about the consequences, did it for their own benefit, without thinking or care in the world that somebody would be fired from a job. Who gets elevated, who stays in power, all comes down to those conversations. The Jewish community, of course, knows this calculus intimately. Think about Israel. Fine. Think about the rising anti-Semitism, even more challenging. Think about the war that we're facing, or we are in. Who decides who's safe? Who decides who to defend? The people making these calculations then, just as today, I don't think are villainous cartoon characters. I think they're people who want to keep funding, who want to keep their jobs, keep their seat at the table, keep their institution safe, keep their access, and keep their relevance. But somewhere in a cave, there's a career that's ended, or a business, there's a career that's ended. Someone's paying for that calculation. Bar Yochai told the truth in a room he thought was safe. He thought he could have a private conversation and that it wouldn't matter. What he didn't take into consideration was the betrayal that he would face by somebody else for their own advancement. He maintained some integrity. Rome did the rest. So what happens, you may ask? What do you do when you're given a death sentence and not caught? You run. He ran. So first he goes to the study hall. Too dangerous. He could have impact other rabbis. So he goes to a cave. But this is a miracle. God sustains him. And God plucks in a carob tree in the cave. There's a spring, natural spring, there's water, and they end up burying themselves in sand for like 12 years, just so that everything is preserved. They roll in the cave, and you can imagine them just studying Torah and having a blast. At the end, they go out in the cave, and this is where I disagree with most commentators. Bar Yochai exits after 12 years, and he's so full of fire that things burn up and die around him. And he only exits, by the way, after the prophet Elijah comes in and tells him, hey, the Emperor Rome is dead. You can head out. Well, the divine voice comes out and says, you emerged from the cave in order to destroy my world with your fire? Go back in the cave. While most commentators read the story about spiritual intensity, about mystics that are so purified by the study of Torah that ordinary life cannot withstand their highly spiritually purified gaze. And yet for me, again, I find something different. Bar Yochai looks out and sees a farmer. He sees some guy just chilling, doing his own thing, plowing his field, while he was sentenced to death for telling the truth. He was, I think, burning inside from deep betrayal. His gaze wasn't mysticism. It was grief wearing the mask of righteousness. He lost 12 years of his life, having to go into hiding. He had rage, justifiably so. Ordinary life itself was lost to him. And what's struggling and painful, I think, was to be rebuked by God. And God said, "You cannot burn the world for your own rage." I don't think Bar Yochai was wrong for pointing out the faults of Rome. The farmer, I don't think, was wrong for keeping a plow in the field. And I don't think Yehuda ben Gerim, while he did get promoted and the collaboration was real, I don't think he did so with the idea of sending his boss, his friend, into a cave. God, by the way, I don't think is either telling him his anger is unjustified, but he's also saying that your anger is so intense that you can't see the holiness in the ordinary anymore. You can't see the goodness around you. You're so burning inside. So he went back in the cave for 12 more months. Finally, he shifts. The twilight of Shabbat is coming, and he sees an old man running down the path with 2 branches. One for Zachor, to remember Shabbat, and one for Shemor, to preserve Shabbat. Bar Yochai watches the man, and a peace comes over him. Because Shabbat is ordinary, it's perfect, it's wonderful. Bar Yochai's son comes out though, well, he's burning everything still, he's got to go back in the cave. It's not an argument, by the way, with God that helped him heal. It's not that he saw some profound thing. It's that he was finally able to put his anger down. It wasn't that the old man came over and said anything to him. I think it was simply that the old man was able to demonstrate holiness and simplicity, and recognizing that not everybody has equal intent. People are just living their life. The Talmud teaches this, I think, very quietly. When Bar Yochai emerges in peace, he does not recognize or see individuals that he believes he could trust as potential informers. He makes a calculation that he lost 12 years of his life, yes, and 13 if you count the 12 months. But it wasn't the farmer's fault. It wasn't anybody else's fault in front of him. They were just living their life, and he needs to go back about living theirs. It's not a failure. It was an opportunity for him to find his way and recognize ordinary holiness. And this is the detail, by the way, that got me this time when reading this same story. Bar Yochai goes looking to prepare something. He doesn't just exit the cave, he exits with peace. And he goes to the marketplace, the place that he condemned initially at the very beginning, a place where there's prostitutes, unholiness, he would say. And what does he do? He looks at the very symbol of Rome in the marketplace, and instead of burning it with words or actions, he praises it and blesses the ground. He doesn't do it because he was wrong about Rome. He does it because the people who shop in the market aren't Yehuda ben Gerim. They're just people buying bread, living their lives in an imperfect world, under an unjust empire, trying to do small holy things with whatever they have. And they deserve a rabbi who can actually see them without judging them in anger. As Jews go about lighting their bonfires on Monday in Israel and other more Orthodox communities, they do so by honoring Shimon bar Yochai, because they think of the fire that he brought out. And frequently they'll say that it was this mystical fire. And it could be. But I also think the first case, if we think about the fact that he came out twice from the cave, the first time he was so frustrated still, burned even more from the informer, frustrated at the farmer for not reacting and responding to him, frustrated that there was a collaborator among his friends. The fire consumed everything because it could not metabolize the distance between the world as it is and the world as he wished it would be. The second time he, though, emerged, he was finally able to let the betrayal die down, let the intensity unwind, and live in small details of the moment. He was able to see the gift of those around him. He was able to highlight the ordinary and see that that's holy. I think sometimes, especially today, we all get frustrated. We see the imperfect world, we see the injustice, and we are rightfully justified in their burning inside. But I ask, for what purpose are we burning? And how can we make sure that we find a sense of peace? Shabbat Shalom.